Hey guys, Rob with WePayOffDebt.ca. A little sick today, but I'm coming at you with a tip regarding getting your budget on straight, getting your financial lives on straight. And now what this comes down to is something called the buffer zone. Took a while for me to get the hang of this, took a while for us to mold it into our lives, but it works like this. First off, everybody, no matter where you're at financially, everybody needs an emergency fund. Okay? If you have any kind of emergency, you don't want debt to be an option. You want to stay away from debt as much as possible. That's one of the main characteristics of millionaires, believe it or not, is they stay away from debt. So you want to stay away from debt. So what that means is if the car breaks down tomorrow, you need to make an emergency trip across country for a relative, you need to whatever, you need an emergency fund. So first thing in your brain, take a chunk of money, and put that away in your emergency fund. And we can have discussions as to how much and where to keep it. But that's not the point of this message. The point of this message is, on top of that, you need a bit of a buffer zone. And what the buffer zone is if you're going to budget monthly, for example, then at the first of the month, odds are good you don't get paid right there and then. And so what you need is a buffer zone that would last between the first of the month and the first time you get paid. And potentially more than that, because you have to spend money, usually, within that zone. And so you need a buffer. And what this buffer is you are constantly spending it and replenishing it, spending it and replenishing it. And if you follow my advice regarding budgeting, the absolute key to having a good budget is you are tracking and spending on paper every single dollar. So what that means then is if you have a buffer zone of, say, $1,000, well then at the beginning of the month, you start with exactly $1,000 in the account. You spend, money goes back into the account, you spend, money goes back into the account. And at the end of the month, because you scheduled and made clear every single penny was going to go, and theoretically none of it's going to your buffer zone, then at the end of the month, when the month is done and all expenses have been paid for the month, guess what you have in the account? Exactly $1,000. There were times in the month where you had 300, times in the month where you had maybe $50. But at the end of the month, you have exactly whatever your buffer zone was. And so this money is always in your account. Now, to figure out what your buffer zone should be, the thing that worked well for me is actually just looking back last few months. And so what I would do is I actually went to a spreadsheet and I just typed in, here was the balance in my account on the first of the month. Here was the balance in my account right before I got paid. Subtract them. Do that for 1 month. Do that for the next month. The next month, it'll take 5 minutes on a spreadsheet. It's not very long, especially if you have online banking. And what you'll know then is how much your money varies from month to month. So what I would do then, I would say, well, take the worst case scenario of all those. So maybe in 1 month it went down $2,000. Okay. The worst case scenario is $2,000 and add a couple hundred to it, maybe $2,200 then. Now you can do this on baby step 2 if you're just paying off debt, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. If you're on baby step 2, what I would recommend more is this, because you're throwing everything at the debt, and it feels disingenuous to have a buffer zone on top of this, because this is not, I'll say it again, not your emergency fund. This is not your emergency fund. And so it feels disingenuous having more money set aside. So what I recommend instead is this. If you're being intense at the debt, throwing everything you got, this is what I did when we were trying to get out of debt. What I would do is I would literally at the end of the month, whatever was left in the account, let me clarify that. At the end of the month, I would look ahead this coming month. What's going to happen before my next payday? And I would actually look ahead, and I had a spreadsheet of common items that might come out before my first payday. And so I had my property taxes, I remember, in there, and I had my first mortgage payment in there, and I had a couple other things in there. Food. We get a weekly food budget. We transfer money to our food account every Thursday. And so I would go through and I would figure out how many of these things are actually going to happen before the first paycheck hits our account this month. I would then add about $100, $200 on top of that and call that the buffer zone. And so when I was in baby step 2, my buffer zone changed every single month. It was just the absolute minimum I could barely handle for this coming month. And I'll tell you, doing it that way was not the greatest for 2 reasons. One is, in a given month, I might have planned to put $1,500 on debt. And then at the end of the month, now when I look at the actual next few weeks of my budget, oh crap, I need more than I expected, more than I had at the beginning of last month. And so some of that $1,500 debt prepayment actually had to go to my buffer zone. That kind of sucks. Second, the other issue was sometimes, and it would happen very rarely, but sometimes the amount of money I put into the account was not enough because I forgot something or whatever, or because after the first pay would bump it up and up, but then it would have more negatives and it would go farther down than I expected it to. And I would be in overdraft, or I'd be dealing with my emergency fund or what have you at that point. Okay, so that's a technique. If you can do it, it's a little more dangerous, but it definitely feels like you're throwing everything you've got at the debt. It can be a little frustrating to see, if you've got a $3,000 buffer zone, especially if it's something big, it's definitely frustrating to see $3,000 sitting in your account this month, and you're like, oh, I wish I could throw that at the debt. But if that's what you need, that's what you need, right? So that's it. Make sure you want to keep this buffer zone as absolutely small as possible and really be on top of when things are coming out of the account. The greatest thing is, most of the things you're spending money on, you can choose when you're going to spend them. Very often. There's a lot of them you can't. Utility bill is going to come out at the same time. Mortgage payment is going to come out at the same time. Fine. You deal with those. But then if you miss a little bit, there's usually other dollars in there that you consciously have to spend. And if something goes wrong, you can always say, okay, I guess I'm not going to do that for another week. I'm going to wait for the next payday. So that was my experience. Hopefully you find that useful to you. Please, guys, head over to the website, WePayOffDebt.ca, and share these videos, please. I really want to get more people to find out about how to actually get out of debt, how to control their spending, how to feel confident financially in Canada. So I hope that encourages you. I hope that gives you some practical tools for your tool belt. Have a good one. We'll see you again soon.